Hi, I'm Dominic Kingston.
And I'm Leah Lavoie.
And welcome to the Corp Diem podcast.
So today we had the pleasure of talking to Jean-Philippe Couture. Jean-Philippe is a founder, a CEO, and a lawyer, which is not a combination that we hear super often. Lawyers are risk-averse, structured, credential-driven, all things that don't usually apply to entrepreneurs. Starting his career in 2007 at the Tax Court of Canada, JP's law career has included experience with both large national law firm and a Big Four professional firm where he started their corporate law practice. When we think of lawyers, we think of people with a lot of free time and creative ideas. No, we don't. So it's going to be really interesting to talk to JP today and learn more about how he went from being a lawyer to also being an entrepreneur.
JP, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
How are you doing today, JP?
Very good.
Very good. So I have a good little warm-up question for you just to get us comfortable on the mic. So what's an innovation in the legal field that excites you right now?
Probably the AI, but not just like most people understand AI to be like OpenAI and what's going on there. But I think, there's all these models coming out that are more specialized towards professionals, legals, more accurate answers. I think this is definitely something that's going to change the industry and augment the ability of lawyers to deliver legal services.
How do you use AI in your law practice? Because obviously law is very structured, very specific. There's no margin for error. So do you use any AI tools when it comes to being a lawyer?
Yeah, I do. I think you have to be careful with client data. So there's restrictions there. That's the first thing. I think the second thing is you have to be careful because the AI sometimes it has a side to it where it invents things, like it has a creative side to it. So, I mean, as you can imagine as a lawyer, the worst thing that can happen to you is that the AI invents something. But you can use it, for example, if you're drafting letters, back in the day, you would go to a legal assistant and say, I want to send a letter to such and such person, and it needs to say ballpark this. Now you can use AI, and the key is really to understand how to prompt the AI. I would say anyone who wants to learn about AI, the first thing they should learn is about how to correctly and effectively prompt the machine. So it's very important how you ask your questions. So this is one example. If you need summarized data, for example, or a nice little infographic, there's an application that I use whenever I want to do a presentation. I do an outline of my presentation, and I throw that in there, and then it just builds a presentation with my slide formatting and had pictures, infographics, and things like that. So that saves a lot of time potentially.
So not as much for idea generation, but more so as a tool to help you with your ideas, the thoughts that you have, and then just to polish
exactly.
those off.
Yeah, exactly. You have to be careful whenever you're querying it with, legal substantive knowledge, like, for example, case law or anything like that. I know there's a lot of people who use it to summarize cases, but I think it comes with a certain level of risk. Unless you absolutely know exactly what the case says, I think you absolutely have to go read the case no matter what.
When did you want to be a lawyer? Were you a little kid and be like, I want to be a lawyer, I want to practice law? Or is it something that came up later?
Yeah, I think I always I was always intrigued by the law. And I remember I did my undergrad in business finance. And at the time I looked up, and I had done some courses in tax. And I was like, okay, tax is an interesting area of law, a little bit nerdy, but interesting. So this is how it all started, and I went into law, and I was always genuinely curious about law in general. There's areas I would never practice, but it doesn't mean that I don't have an interest and I'm not curious about what's going on. Like, for example, criminal, I would never practice in criminal law, but I'm always curious. Like, I was at a conference last weekend, and some presentation had a little bit more of a criminal constitutional law flavor, and I always thought this is interesting.
So there's that flexibility in law too, right? It's not like you study law and you have to be a tax lawyer. You can kind of just go and shift between practices, right?
Exactly. I mean, law, I always say what you learn in law school is essentially you just learn how to think as a lawyer. You don't know much. You don't have a lot of substantive knowledge. And then you start your articling, and, before, if you practice in a large firm article, you're probably looking at 5-7 years to become a partner. But that period, associate period I always call it as a learning. It's a little bit the equivalent of doctors with residency. These are the years where you learn your skills, you learn the substantive knowledge, but also you learn how to act as a lawyer and push the methodology even further.
So you're not only a lawyer, you're also an entrepreneur. So have you always known that law wasn't just going to be it for you, that you wanted also another career, or is this something that you found a bit later on in your life? And if so, what was that moment where you're like, oh, law's great, but I kind of want more?
Yeah, I think I was always intrigued as a lawyer practicing in business, like corporate and tax. You always meet entrepreneurs that are buying or selling businesses. And I was always curious about their story and talk with them. And at one point I was like, okay, maybe I would like that. But then it's like, okay, but what? And I think at the same time, I had reached a point where I had done a certain number of years in law, like 10, 12 years. And I was like, okay, the next 10 or 12 will likely look like the last 10 or 12. And then at the time I had discovered innovation in law, which kept really my interest, like in technology innovation in law. So I think today I'm still practicing law because of the tech, the mix of law and tech keeps everything fresh and moving forward. But I think if I was, the first 12 years of my career, the second 12 years of my career were like the first 12, probably I would have got off the wagon at one point.
Yeah, you like change, you like learning new things, right, and adapting.
Keeping things fresh and yeah.
Yeah.
So in law, so you're talking about technology, what's the propensity for law firms to adopt and evolve the technology, especially as technology is moving ever so much faster?
Yeah, I think it's, I always say legal technology right now is probably where fintech, like the bank and the financial industry technology was 15 years ago.
Is that far behind?
There's a few companies that are doing it, but really we're not pushing things very far. There is some innovation, but it's not like, this is not earth-shattering. Like this is not like, part of it is due to the regulatory environment, but my approach to the regulatory environment has always been, if you really want to innovate, yes, the regulatory environment will sometimes complicate things, but there's always ways, to achieve what the regulations are there for while innovating. Like, for example, we have regulations, lawyers in Canada, the data needs to be resident in Canada, saved in Canada, on server in Canada. Well, with cloud now, all the big providers have facilities in Canada. So there's always ways to manage regulation and to respect the spirit of the law or the spirit of their regulations.
Would law firms be disrupted by innovation, or is there an opportunity for a business called a law firm to disrupt the industry using tech?
I think law firms are somewhat disrupted, and I think you're only, as a law firm, as innovative as your least innovative person in the firm.
So the guy in the corner?
Yeah, the guy in the corner who, just started using, his email. I'm joking about that, but, law firms still use faxes. Like it's interesting. Early in my career, I was in a big national law firm, and then I went to a big accounting firm, like a professional firm, one of the big four. And I remember when we first asked for a fax, they were looking at us as if we were coming from a different planet. But, it was still very commonly in use to have a fax. And if you talk with the younger generation, they would even know, in those firms, they would even know what a fax is.
What is a fax? Anything in my life, yeah.
But, so it's still, it's still very prominent,
So obviously you're the founder of Ingenio and you're also the CEO, but before getting into that, did you have any other business ideas or business ventures that you explored before actually sticking to Ingenio?
Yeah, a ton of business idea. I think the mistake I did is I was trying, at one point with friends and potential partners or people that I wanted to do business. We were looking at, different businesses to purchase that had nothing to do with law or my knowledge or my training. We look at car washes. We look at, a business like a distributor business, a fairly large distributing business. We look at different things. But I think at the end of the day, I think sort of light went off really when I started Ingenio around,
So when did that idea come about for Ingenio? What was the moment where you're like, oh, this isn't working as a lawyer, we need a solution for this, and there's nothing out there that's meeting my needs?
Yeah. So I think it came gradually, but I think essentially I was with a large national law firm. I went to the large professional firm, and we had a pretty defined plan, and at the center of it, there was a software, and then for 18 months, we tried to get it approved by the Big Four's IT security team, and would not get it approved then. So we started looking around.
What was that? What was the software for, at that time? What was it going to do?
It was called ALF, and it's still around. It's still like a workhorse. It was a good software, but it was 35 years old. So I mean, IT security, before the internet was different than it is now. So it's, that's how we essentially started looking around, then try to find startup. The problem is I've always seen the value of closely aligning technology with law. And it's very difficult to find lawyers who are, computer science major or have an understanding of tech. Very difficult to match these things very closely to make the product even more relevant. And in, when I was at the Big Four, I remember looking my colleagues on the accounting side. They had, tax software for do tax returns, and you'd punch all the numbers, and at the end it would say, oh, you have an opportunity here to save money. If you do this instead of that, you're going to save $100. And I was like, why don't we have anything like this as lawyer? Why don't we have anything that prevents us from making mistakes? Because mistakes, at the end of the day, as a lawyer, your commodity is your time. So you sell your time. You can't sell your time doing mistakes. Mistakes are costly. So how do we reduce mistakes? And then at the same time, we had the demographic problems. Like 20% of the workforce in Canada is between 55 and 65. So that means over the next 10 years, they're going to retire. If you had immigration, even a very high level, and young people coming into the market, you are not filling those jobs. Now we're talking a little bit less of that because of AI, but I think it will be still an issue.
You still need to be more efficient with fewer people.
And not retracing a step. Like there's such huge waste. Not just financial waste, but like sometimes really good relationship with a client, but then you do something by mistake, not of your fault, but due to a series of things that, system failure, and then you lose face in front of the client. And then it forces the client to ask himself, well, if they fail at doing this very simple thing, what does it tell me? What does it tell me about the very complicated thing? And this is always an issue. Like lawyers, we sell trust. People trust lawyers. It's one of the most important commodity of lawyers.
So Ingenio today, what's the vision behind the business and then the software that you're building?
Yeah, so we looked around and we can't find the software. So initially we tried to work with other companies, and it was just not going in the direction we wanted. So I thought at one point I was like, well, maybe I'll have to do it. And I was very naive. Thought it would take 6 months. Probably spent 1/15 of what we've spent so far, and then all would be good. But I think it's a lot more complicated. It's starting a business or building a team from scratch is always complicated. It takes at least 18 months before you have a certain stability, a certain culture, people all pushing in the same direction, understanding the mission, the vision, and what you're trying to accomplish. And then marrying legal with tech is very hard, because you have tech people that don't understand legal, and you have legal people that don't understand tech.
And you're trying to find. So are you the translator between the two groups? Was that?
No, I think I've learned. I mean, I've learned enough on the tech side to be dangerous. I joke about that, but like I don't. I've learned to code, but I don't code. But I think I've made a serious effort through courses, online courses, readings, and all of this to understand them. But I think a lot of them too have, like some of the devs that we have or business analysts could be a very good paralegal or a junior lawyer in a law firm by now.
So it's just taking that length of time for both teams in a sense to learn the other part of the business that they're in.
Yeah. And I think there's a huge value, intellectual property, in doing that, like making sure that there's this closeness between the two.
And how was it building a business while still practicing law? When you started Ingenio, were you still working 40 plus hours a week as a lawyer, doing it on your own in the evenings, or did you have someone else you were working with while you were building it? Like, how did you manage? Because it's hard enough to build a business. It's even harder when you're still working full time.
And for me, like it's all been self-funded. So it was really hard to, just
Can't stop
you
working.
can't stop working. Like you
Yeah.
gotta, because you got the payroll to do at the end of the month, and you know, sometimes you doubt yourself. You're just like, okay, we said it was going to cost X, and now we're 5 times that. But if we stop, it's worth nothing.
Yeah.
We've lost. It's a pure loss. And then, you know, you start getting clients, and clients are making comments and giving you really good feedback. So you're like, okay, let's keep pushing.
So how long has the journey been to date? How long have you, since you
So
started?
the business
since then?
officially started January 2019. So for the first 9 months, I was still like at a Big Four, and you know, eventually, because I had a notice period and to withdraw from the partnership there. So later in the fall of 2019, I essentially went on my own. So I've been for a
Two
long
businesses.
time. Yeah. So essentially
Right away, right?
practicing law
Yeah.
and doing that at the same time.
What was the reaction to the people in your life when you were like, I'm going to start my own business? Were your lawyer friends like, oh, why would you do that? You're going from something that's so certain to something that's completely new. How did your partner react? How did your family
Yeah.
react?
I think my partner was supportive because of, you know, she had seen my frustration with, the old school way of practicing law, the lack of sort of innovation and things like that. And the traditional model law firm, I mean, in fairness, I think a lot of it has changed now. I think COVID has sort of shake things up there. If you go in modern law firm, a lot has changed, but it's still, there's a huge difference between the work culture at Shopify versus at any, seven sister law firm in Toronto. So I think, smaller regional firm, I think I've done really well or doing really well because they adapt faster to sort of pace of change. So I think short answer, I think my partner was really supportive. I think some colleagues, it's funny, they still don't completely understand it.
You think you're crazy? What are you doing?
Because being an entrepreneur, you have to accept that, if finances are tight 1 month, you're not doing payroll. You're still doing payroll, but it's your pay that comes off. It's your investment that you liquidate to pay for certain things. So I think that comes with theory as an entrepreneur, and you don't make the money that you were making as a full-time lawyer before. So
Did you expect that when you started the business?
Oh, yeah. I
Like
think
you
I was-
kind of
yeah.
went in wide open?
yeah, so really interesting. But I think I agree. Like I would say, some colleagues, former colleagues, still don't get it. But I think I'm really encouraged. Sometimes I do a demo for our software, because I still do a lot of the demos. I do a demo for our software with a law firm, and recently someone said, "Why don't you guys build more for lawyers, because this is really relevant for us?" And that makes that tells me that we've done something right by matching the law and the tech expertise together, bridging that gap. So.
That's very encouraging to hear. Yeah, that validation.
But at the same time, there's challenges all the time. Like I think, going from paper, like what we do essentially, we take binders, like the data is very analog. It's in binders, and we're bringing it into the digital world. So there's challenges associated with this. It's very custom. Each lawyers do things a little bit differently. There's good and bad practices. There is history, like some of the firm that we work with are over 100 years old.
And so since you've started, like obviously AI has come out and it's sort of changed, let's say, everything. So how has your business changed since chat came on the scene, and there's more models now than you can count. So like, how has that impacted the business from both vision where you're going point of view and just sort of your build? Like, do you have tech debt, and like, what does that look like?
Yeah, I think we've always tried to be nimble. I think the AI forces us to be nimble, because I think if you want to stay relevant, you can't be just camp on one set of technology. Otherwise, you're going to quickly become irrelevant. So I think what we've tried to do is we're trying to become like an app that is multimodal. But it all come with challenges, because, for us, for example, privacy and data residency, we cannot use some of the model like DeepSeek. We can't use, US models, and we have obligation there. And also security certification. So we got security certification last year. So every year we have to maintain it. So we got to be really careful whenever we bring in new technology. We got to be really careful about data residency, about what's the model. Like in AI, the risk is you want to be able to process the data, but you do not, like it has to be a one-way street. You're using it, but they're not using your data to train the model. So that's the big risk for law firms. So we do sort of full round of testing to ensure that.
And then from that, most law firms are like bill by the hour. That's sort of the business model.
Mm-hmm.
How do you see your tech and tech in general changing that business model? And how would law firms make money in the future if AI helps lawyers do more faster?
Yeah.
Either they have to do more or they're going to make less money because they're doing things faster.
No, I think there's definitely, like when I was at the Big Four, they had an expression for this. There was productivization of services. So you take a service, you turn it into a product and sell it to a client. I think law firms are trying slowly to do this, but I think they're probably 10, 12 years behind other professions.
So you'd buy it as a fixed price
Exactly.
for an output?
And you should know, as a professional, provided that you have set some boundaries, you should know exactly how much things cost. If after 10, not even 10 years, but 5, 6 years of practice, you don't really know how much, building a shareholders agreement is going to cost, or you don't know where to put these boundaries, because, there's two sides to that. There's a side that, there's a lawyer that will, spend so much time on it, obsess over the details that are not super relevant. And then the other side of it is the client that, if you're too general, they will abuse. So if your engagement letter, for example, is, not setting the proper boundaries, you end up, the scope of your project will stretch and stretch and stretch, and you're doing all this work for free because you gave a fixed quote at the beginning. So there is that. But I always say, one of our main goal at Ingenio is to make sure that lawyer can start making money when they sleep, and then the client have more, see more value in their work. So
everyone wins.
Yeah, exactly. So I think clients are willing to pay more for certain services at different stage in their business venture, but they need to see more. They need to see things that are more relevant to them. So Clio, the software company, large software company out of Vancouver that does practice management software for lawyers, they run like a legal market trends every year where they do interviews with lawyers, but also people consume legal services. And, you look into this, there's definitely some struggles. Communication is one. More and more clients of legal services want to have digital services. They don't want to go and sit downtown in a brick and mortar law firm. But yet, law firms are still building, offices downtown in very expensive corner of downtown, not offering a lot of services online. So I think there's an opportunity there to help them through that transition, to capture that 65%, or I think the number I saw was around 65% that wanted more digital services, to capture that and then offer them more through technology, like through access, through different tools online.
So for Ingenio's current service offering, like what do you offer a law firm today, and what's the vision for, given what you're saying, for the future? Like how would you go from where we are today to digitizing the next 65% or the 65% of services?
So we've really focused around corporate law, digital corporate law. So essentially, every time a company is incorporated, you need by law to keep certain records. Those include constitutive documents and legal documents, but often we'll have financial statement and things like this. Typically, those are kept in a binder on the shelf of a law firm. Traditionally, that's all it's been done anyway. But increasingly, clients, those are digital, and clients want to have access to it. Sometimes they need to send it to their accountant, the bank. So we really focus on how do we take that binder and bring it into the digital world. So that's the first step. And then that record needs to be updated. How do we make sure that it's efficiently updated by law firms with the correct information, really improving the accuracy of it? So we focus on that, and then to offer what I would call self-service options for client that request something. If they want to do something at 11 o'clock, if they want to incorporate a company at 11 o'clock on a Friday night, they should be able to get started.
That's it. So I do have another question related to AI. So obviously you were saying there's always a new model. It's hard to keep up. So how do you stay grounded in your vision while also, obviously you want to innovate, you want to be using the newest product, but is it kind of hard to balance that with, we just started to master this product, and now there's something new? Yes, it's a lot better, but how much of your time can you spend learning new AI models?
It's really it's really hard because it's this whole shiny object. Like, every new model is supposed to be the greatest thing. Nobody release a new model and say, okay, this is worse than all of our competitors. So I think part of it is benchmarking, because you want to innovate, but innovating for just innovating, like without delivering better result, is not super helpful. So I think where our focus is try to benchmark them, and benchmark is essentially comparing the different models. And when you look at them, how they're benchmark in regular market, is you'll have, they'll compare them. How are these models doing with a physics exam? Well, I'm sorry, it's not super useful if you say, how good is this with legal data or with legal documents?
So you're kind of creating your own benchmarks then in that case?
Yeah, we have to, because we have to be able to say, okay, before I invest to get to that stage, is this really like the smart thing? And then increasingly, we also do more like proof of concept testing beforehand, just to make sure that we get the right result. And we put, as a startup, you have limited resources, that we put our resources in the right bet, if you allow me to do this. Yeah.
The tech changes going on, and sort of back to one of the questions earlier today was, so how, given your services, how hard is it to get or find the early adopters within the law firms?
Yeah, it's hard. I think that's the hardest part. I think, every firm, we always have a group of people that are super enthused and want to move forward. And there's always people that are, concerned about their job. And whenever you talk about innovation and technology, they always think, oh, it's a way to make me do more work for the same salary. And sometimes it's just to make you do better work, because, as human, we forget things, we make mistakes, distractions, and things like this. What if we can deliver the same amount of work but with less mistakes? And these have a cost at the end of the day that makes a huge difference.
And there's like sort of a notion of quality of work. So if you can get the tools to do repetitive or mundane tasks, that leaves the human to do more interesting and creative tasks. Is there a bit of that trade-off as well?
It's what I call the value-added work. Like, essentially we're saying, you as a lawyer, if you can spend more time with your client, learning about their business and what their needs are, than, drafting corporate resolution, that's a win for everybody. You don't add value drafting a resolution. You had value, coming up with the idea that needs to be implemented by a resolution, by an agreement, by instrument, or all kinds of things. Yeah.
So the drafting is the commodity work, and the understanding is really the value-added work. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. The advice. I think lawyers increasingly needs to be legal advisor first, but also a business advisor.
Yeah.
I think they had, like, from a risk management, I think they had tremendous value in those fields. And I think this is kind of the unpolished gem that they have in their toolbox that, they're not essentially acting on. And I think, at the end of the day, entrepreneurs would be a lot better, if more lawyers are in that role. Yeah,
that's interesting. So you're taking your kind of learning how to think as a lawyer, understanding law, being exposed to business and seeing a lot of that, and really spending time advising the client on, say, risk mitigation or those decisions. And then the drafting is really just codifying that.
Yeah.
Right.
Risk mitigation is important. Like, I always joke, I've been saying for years that typically, if you boil down what does a lawyer do at the end of the day, most of it is risk management right now. How do you do this? Well, preserving rights and going to court. You're doing it, through all kinds of litigation, but you're also doing it by, agreements, by implementing, making sure you're on side of your regulatory obligation. But it's interesting, some areas of law over the years, the evolution has not been, like, the risk element of it has been eliminated by taking an insurance policy. So technically, you could replace entire practice area by just buying an insurance policy. You can buy, like in Europe, it's very popular. You can buy an insurance that covers tax risk. So, for example, if you buy a company and they might have done something that was a little bit aggressive in the past and you're worried about it, you can go and get an insurance policy that will pay should the tax authorities come back. You do that every day. Most people buy a house. When you buy a house, they buy people buy title insurance. A large portion of the fees you pay to the lawyer for the transaction is towards title insurance. This is to cover something that used to be done by lawyers, to review a title to make sure that there was a full line
So you don't do the
of
review
ownership.
anymore. You just buy the insurance and skip the review. Okay.
So technically, a lot of law can be replaced by insurance policy. But I think, an even more efficient way of doing it is, and less disruptive, is through technology and innovation and just doing it right the first time.
That makes sense.
And a follow-up on that, obviously you were saying that, I'm not sure exactly what the stat was, but most of the workforce is in their 50s, 60s. They're going to be retiring. Do you think it's going to become easier and easier to get lawyers to adapt as they're, lawyers are going to be more so millennials, hopefully Gen Z in a bit. So do you think they're going to be more inclined to adapt new solutions and obviously more tech savvy?
There's definitely an age factor, but I wouldn't put everything on age. I think there's also an attitude. There are people regularly when we talk with law firms, we see people in law firms that are older in age, but they're very tech savvy. They've really adapted. I remember when I started practicing, in mid 2000, we had a lawyer in our firm that he was close to retirement, but he was the first one to use, the transcription software, like where you're talking and it's writing an email, which looks trivial today. But back then, we're talking about 16, 18 years ago.
That's
this
impressive.
Was impressive. You see that, but you also see some young people that are very anchored in the old ways and not looking at how they could improve or make their life easier. At the end of the day, it all boils down to give them more time. Like if you don't spend as much time doing things that are trivial, they're not trivial. I'd say things that are less important in the view of the client. You have more times with your family. You have more times to have a proper life-work balance.
Yeah, it's a bit of an investment. There's a learning curve, but after that, you get it tenfold over, right?
Absolutely.
So much more time. And so far, kind of just to close off this section, what would you say has been the hardest part about building Ingenio? Is there a certain moment? Has it been implementing AI, or is it, the sourcing of human resources?
Yeah, I think I'd always say the challenge is, bridging that gap between the tech and the tech team and the legal expertise. This is a hard one. It's like you don't want this to be like sort of like a railway running in parallel. You want these things to be as close as possible, and sometimes it's hard.
Did you foresee that going into it, or was that sort of like you discovered the challenge of that when you're in it?
Oh, I think I discovered it when I was in it. Yeah,
Didn't think it's hard.
And building a team is hard. Like people's life change and they come and go. You're bound to hire people and have the wrong expectation or it doesn't work out. So I think this is another factor. But I think really, like they say, the rubber hit the road when you start onboarding clients. And when you're doing law, you're presented with a problem and you find a solution. When you're doing software for lawyers, you're trying to think of every problem possible and develop a solution for everything. So there's a whole prioritization of issues, and for a fact that if you leave one door open, somebody's going to step in it. So sometimes it's like you shake your head, but this is the hard part. Yeah.
Okay, JP. So usually we end every episode with 3 bits of advice, but from a lawyer's perspective, would you have 3 bits of advice for entrepreneurs with how they handle the law, perhaps with incorporation or other business factors like that?
Yeah, I'd say be curious focus more on providing business advice and not just the minute details of the law that you're giving to these clients, but understanding their business, what they're doing, what are the challenges they're facing, and be there as an advisor, as a business advisor and a legal advisor when they need you. And I'd say also, the second thing I would say is focus on giving clients the right things right, because you can give them things right, but if you don't give them the right things, and I always think about a startup that years ago, they had raised $100,000, and he said to me, the first $18,000 that came out of the company was for the incorporation of the shareholders agreement. They built this massive shareholders agreement that essentially 6 months later was outdated because they started bringing investors that wanted certain things in a shareholders agreement. So it's about scaling up what the client needs. So give them an entry level shareholders agreement, covering them for the basic right. Don't try to cover everything. And then
Purpose kind of idea.
exactly. So giving them the right things is really important. And sometimes as lawyers, we're not necessarily trained like this. And, the model being, an hourly rate doesn't help with that either.
Thank you so much, JP.
You're welcome.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for tuning into the show. We'll be back with more entrepreneurial advice on future shows.